The protagonist finds herself standing at the crossroads of a life she no longer recognizes. Recently divorced, her emotional world is in turmoil. The decision to end her marriage has left her questioning her actions, wondering if the pain she's caused is justified. As she grapples with the fallout of her choices, one question lingers. Am I a bitch? It's a reflection on her behavior, a search for self-understanding in a world that's become less predictable, and a journey to reconcile her actions with her emotions. In the early years of their marriage, everything seemed perfect. There was love, stability, and a growing sense of partnership. They had children, built careers, and shared a home full of laughter and memories. Life was good as they navigated the balance of work and family. Over time, however, minor frustrations began to surface. Small disagreements became slightly larger ones, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They were simply two people learning to coexist, and while not perfect, their marriage seemed to be stable. But beneath the surface, little cracks began to form, unnoticed by both. Life felt predictable, until it didn't. The turning point came when the protagonist received a well-deserved promotion at work. What should have been a moment of pride quickly began to unravel. As she ascended in her career, her husband seemed to remain stagnant. The balance of their relationship shifted. She began to feel like she was carrying the weight of both her personal and professional lives, while he seemed to lag behind. Their roles in the marriage had changed. She was no longer the wife who supported, she was the one who needed support. The resentment started small but grew over time. With each promotion, each new responsibility, she felt more alone. It was as if she had become the only one driving their future, and the burden was suffocating. What had once been a partnership now felt like an unequal alliance. The resentment seeped into everything, from daily conversations to unspoken expectations. Emotional detachment from her husband became more pronounced as the months went by. Conversations with him felt increasingly like routine tasks rather than meaningful exchanges. At work, however, things were different. There was a colleague, a man with whom she shared interesting conversations. What started as casual chats during lunch breaks quickly escalated into something more. It wasn't about love at first sight, but rather about feeling alive again. The affair seemed like a way to escape the emotional numbness she felt at home. Her marriage no longer fulfilled her needs, but this man, someone who made her feel valued and desired, did. She told herself it was a temporary indulgence, a harmless way to regain something she'd lost. But deep down, she knew it was more than just an escape. It was a dangerous path that was altering her view of everything. The breaking point came unexpectedly one evening when her husband tried, in his own way, to make things right. He cooked dinner and cleaned the house, hoping to show he still cared. But instead of feeling grateful, she felt disgusted. The gesture, which would have once been sweet, now felt patronizing. She could no longer find warmth in him or the life they had built. His efforts to connect seemed like an imposition, a reminder of the disconnect that had grown between them. As she watched him, something inside her snapped. She realized she had emotionally checked out long ago, and no amount of his affection could bring her back. That night, the decision to divorce was made. Despite his pleas, despite his desperation, she knew it was time to let go, even if it meant losing everything they had once shared. The divorce was a relief, initially. The weight that had accumulated over the years seemed to lift off her shoulders. No longer bound by the responsibilities of a failing marriage, she reveled in her newfound freedom. She could do what she wanted, when she wanted. The first days after the divorce were filled with a sense of liberation. She had room to breathe, to rediscover who she was outside of the roles she had played for so long. It was exhilarating to not have to answer to anyone. The freedom she had longed for felt intoxicating, and for the first time in years, she felt in control of her life again. But as the weeks wore on, the initial joy started to fade, and a gnawing emptiness crept in. As the dust settled, the reality of her new life set in. The house, once orderly and organized, now felt like a constant mess. The kids, once attached to her every word, now sought out their father more often. She struggled to manage everything, work, home, and motherhood, all while feeling increasingly isolated. Her children were adjusting to life without both parents under one roof, and their growing emotional distance made her feel like a stranger in her own home. The weight of responsibility was no longer shared, and it was heavier than she anticipated. The freedom she had fought for felt hollow as she realized that without support, life was far more complicated. In trying to escape her past, she had inadvertently created a new set of problems that no amount of independence could solve. The isolation grew unbearable, and she found herself reaching out to her ex-husband for help. It started with small requests, asking if he could take the kids for the weekend or help with the car repairs. Slowly, these interactions became more frequent. Her ex-husband, though polite, had changed. He was still there for her in practical ways, but the warmth, the connection, had vanished. He had become a distant presence, someone she could rely on but not emotionally lean on. She could see the walls he had built around himself, walls she had helped construct with her own hands. The realization stung. He was there, but not in the way she needed him to be. The distance between them felt insurmountable, and she could no longer deny the deep emotional chasm that separated them. One evening, she went on a date with someone new. It wasn't a serious relationship, just an attempt to find solace in someone else's company. But when she kissed him, a wave of guilt rushed over her. She couldn't escape the feeling that she was still tied to her past, to the family she had left behind. That night, she cried herself to sleep, overwhelmed by remorse. She started seeing a therapist to unpack her emotions, to understand why she had acted the way she did. In those sessions, she began to confront the deeper reasons behind her actions, her need for validation, her fear of being trapped, and her inability to communicate her needs. She realized how much damage she had caused, not only to her ex-husband but also to her children. The path she had chosen had hurt everyone, and the guilt weighed heavily on her heart. Months after the divorce, she reached out to her ex-husband, hoping for a chance to reconcile. She asked if he would consider giving their relationship another shot. His response was cold, filled with hesitation. He had been hurt too deeply, and trust was no longer something he could easily offer. He didn't outright reject the idea, but his uncertainty was palpable. He told her that, even if he could forgive her, it might be too late. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She had broken something that couldn't be easily fixed. The pain of his indifference cut deeper than any argument or betrayal ever had. In that moment, she understood that reconciliation wasn't just about asking for forgiveness. It was about truly earning it, and she wasn't sure she ever could. Looking back on her marriage, the protagonist finally understood the full extent of her mistakes. She had been selfish, driven by her desire for personal freedom at the cost of her family's well-being. Her pursuit of independence had led her down a path of destruction, leaving her ex-husband and children in the wake of her choices. She had wanted to escape the feelings of suffocation, but in doing so, she had created new chains, ones of guilt and regret. Her realization came too late. She could never undo the hurt she had caused, and the possibility of rebuilding what had once been was now out of reach. The lesson was clear. Happiness cannot be found by running from your problems. It must be earned through understanding, empathy, and sacrifice. The protagonist's story is a cautionary tale of the consequences of acting impulsively without considering the full impact of those actions. In her quest for freedom, she overlooked the importance of self-reflection and open communication. To those who may find themselves in a similar situation, her advice is simple. Don't make irreversible decisions without understanding what's at stake. Marriage, family, and love require effort, compromise, and communication. Divorce is not an escape from unhappiness. It is a choice that must be made with deep consideration of the consequences. In the end, the protagonist learns that true freedom comes not from running away, but from confronting and working through the challenges life presents.